The day Marissa threw boiling soup on my face, everything changed. I had ignored her coldness for months, hoping things would get better for the sake of my son, Liam, and my granddaughter, Rosie. But that moment showed me the truth I didn't want to see. My son was living with someone dangerous, someone who hurt him when no one was looking. I thought I was the only target. I was wrong. The burn healed, but the fear in Liam's voice didn't. And when he broke down and told me everything, I knew one thing with painful clarity. This wasn't just a family problem. This was abuse, and I was done staying silent. I should have known something was wrong the moment Marissa opened the door. Her eyes were sharp and cold, looking at me as if I had shown up for an exam she already expected me to fail. She didn't smile. She never really smiled at me. Her lips were pressed together, annoyed before I even spoke. "Did you call before coming?" she asked in a stiff, flat voice. "I texted Liam," I said gently. "He said today was fine." She didn't argue, but she stepped aside like someone who only opened their home because manners forced them to. I walked in with the basket of homemade bread I had baked that morning. I hoped it might soften the usual tension between us. The smell of garlic and herbs filled the kitchen. A pot of soup was bubbling loudly on the stove, steaming the windows. Liam sat at the table with Rosie on his lap, helping her draw circles with the crayon. His face brightened when he saw me. "Mom," he said warmly, standing up. Rosie squealed and reached for me. For a moment, the room felt soft, warm, alive. But the warmth faded the moment Marissa walked in behind me. It was like a light being blown out. I handed Liam the bread. "Fresh sourdough," I said. "It smells amazing." "Thanks, Mom," he replied. Marissa glanced at it but didn't speak. She stirred the soup with more force than needed, the ladle clanking against the pot. I brushed a curl from Rosie's face. "It's chilly today. Maybe put a light sweater on her so she doesn't catch a cold." It was the kind of harmless comment any grandmother would make. But to Marissa, every suggestion was an insult. "She's fine," she snapped without turning. "I didn't mean—" "She's fine," she repeated, eyes narrowing. The room went quiet, except for the bubbling soup. Liam tried to smooth things over. "Mom just worries." Marissa spun around. "Of course she does. She always thinks she knows better." "I didn't say that," I said softly. "You were judging me," she hissed, "just like you always do." I felt my heart thud. I had spent months walking carefully around her moods, telling myself she was stressed, but today something in her eyes looked different. Sharp, unstable. "I'm not judging you," I said. That was all I managed before she grabbed the ladle. In a single frozen moment, she lifted it high. I saw Liam's eyes widen. I heard the hiss of the bubbling broth, then the burning hit. A burst of pain exploded across my cheek as the boiling soup splashed onto my skin. I screamed, the heat digging deep like fire under my skin. Liam rushed forward, grabbing her arm. "What is wrong with you?" he shouted. Marissa didn't look shocked or sorry. She looked pleased. "Maybe now," she said coldly. "You'll stay out of my business." I didn't yell. I couldn't. My throat was tight with pain and humiliation. Tears blurred my vision. I grabbed my purse and walked out. Liam called after me, but I couldn't turn back. The cold air outside hit my burning cheek like a strange kind of relief. I sat in my car trembling before driving away. I didn't go to the hospital. I didn't call the police. I told myself I was protecting Liam. But deep down, I knew the truth. This was only the beginning. For 2 days after the soup incident, I avoided looking at myself in the mirror. The burn had turned into a swollen red patch across my cheek, and the skin felt tight and tender. Every time I touched it, a dull pain reminded me of what happened. I kept telling myself it was an accident, even though I knew it wasn't. Marissa had looked me straight in the eyes when she did it. There was no fear, no regret, only anger. Liam called me many times, but I didn't answer right away. I needed time to think, to breathe, to decide whether I had the strength to face whatever truth was waiting for me. On the third day, he came to my house without calling. When I opened the door, he stood there holding Rosie close to his chest, like he was afraid something might take her away. The moment he saw my face, his eyes filled with guilt. "Mom," he whispered, "I'm so sorry." You didn't do this, I said softly. Come inside. He placed Rosie on the couch with her toys and then sat beside me at the dining table. His hands kept shaking. He tried to speak, but every time he opened his mouth, the words stuck in his throat. I reached for his hand. Tell me, I said. Whatever it is, I need to know. For a moment, he stared at the table, tracing circles on the wood with his finger. Then he sighed, a deep, broken sound. Mom, this isn't the first time she's hurt someone. My stomach tightened. Liam, what do you mean? He swallowed hard. She's hit me before. The room felt like it tilted. I waited for him to explain, hoping I'd heard wrong. He continued, voice small, almost shaking. It started after Rosie was born. Little things at first. She'd get angry if I didn't hold the baby exactly how she wanted, if the bottle wasn't warm enough, if I forgot to put her favorite mug back in the right place. She would scream, push me, throw things at me. I thought it was stress or hormones, but it never stopped. I felt an ache in my chest so heavy it stole my breath. Liam, why didn't you tell me? Because I didn't want you to worry, and because I didn't want you to think I was weak. I shook my head. Being hurt doesn't make you weak. He dropped his face into his hands. Last month, she scratched my neck so badly it bled. She said I made her look stupid in front of her friends. And 2 weeks ago, she hit me with a hairbrush while I was holding Rosie. I almost dropped her. A sharp fear spread through my body. Has she ever hurt Rosie? He shook his head quickly. No. She yells sometimes, but she never hits her. Still, I'm scared. I never know what she'll do next. I reached over and pulled him into a shaky embrace. He felt fragile, like someone who had held himself together too long and finally cracked. You're not alone, I whispered. We'll figure this out. Just then Rosie toddled over, holding a stuffed bear. She pressed it against Liam's leg. Dada sad? She asked. Liam forced a smile and kissed the top of her head. Daddy's okay, baby. But he wasn't okay, and neither was I. After an hour, he finally stood up. I should go home before she gets angry. The words hit me like ice. Liam, no, don't go back. I have to, he said quietly. She'll punish me if I don't. Punish. The word echoed in my mind long after he left. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard the splash of boiling soup, saw the fear behind Liam's smile, watched Rosie's innocent face. My thoughts twisted into knots. Around midnight, my phone buzzed. It was a message from Liam. She's mad. I don't know what to do. Before I could reply, another message arrived. She threw a plate at the wall. Then, Mom, I'm scared. I grabbed my coat and keys and rushed out of the house. The streets were quiet, and the cold air bit at my skin, but my mind was blazing with one thought. I had stayed silent long enough. I couldn't pretend everything was fine. I couldn't let my son and granddaughter live in fear. When I reached their house, the lights were still on. Shadows moved behind the curtains. I stepped out of my car, heart pounding. As I walked toward the door, I heard shouting, Marissa's voice, sharp and wild. I didn't know what I would find inside, but I knew one thing for sure. Whatever happened next would change everything. I did not sleep that night. My mind kept replaying every moment with Demir. The messages, the sweet words, the steady confidence in his voice. Everything that once felt warm now burned like a lie. By morning, my anger had turned into a quiet, sharp focus. I needed answers, and this time I would not enter blindly. I called Demir first. No reply. I tried again. Straight to voicemail. I stared at my phone, feeling a strange calm settle inside me, as if my emotions had stepped aside to let my reason take control. I sent him a message. We need to talk today. No threats, no pleading, just a sentence that carried its own weight. He replied an hour later. I can meet you. Same cafe as before. The cafe felt different now. The last time I was here, I had walked in with trust. This time, I walked in like someone expecting a trap. I chose a table near the window where the morning light made it impossible for anyone to hide their face. I saw Demir enter, sunglasses on, too casual for a man who had been caught. He sat down slowly. "You look tired," he said. I ignored that. "Why don't you start telling me the truth? Or should I?" He shifted in his seat. "What truth?" I placed the printed documents on the table, the fake company records, the accounts with no activity, the property listings that didn't exist. I watched his face closely. There was no shock, no guilt, only a faint pull at the corner of his mouth, as if he was deciding whether to lie again or drop the act. "So," I said, "this is all you do? Find women who want stability, pretend to be the perfect man, then drain them slowly?" His voice changed. The softness was gone. "It's not personal. People want stories. I give them one." A cold wave spread across my chest. "You almost ruined my life." "You gave me that power," he said calmly. "You wanted a husband so badly that you didn't look closely." His words were cruel, but they cut away the last pieces of doubt inside me. Now I saw the real man behind the perfect mask. I leaned forward. "You think I came unprepared?" He frowned. Before meeting him, I'd already spoken with a lawyer friend. I'd also sent all the evidence to a secure folder shared with 2 people I trusted. If anything happened to me, the files would go straight to the authorities. "I gave your name and documents to my lawyer," I said. "If you try to disappear with my money or threaten me, you will be the one running." For the first time, his calm cracked. "You're making a mistake." "No," I said. "I'm correcting one." He fell silent. There was a moment where the air felt heavy, as if the room itself was listening. After a long pause, he leaned back. "What do you want?" he asked quietly. "I want you out of my life. All communication ends today. And you will return every amount I sent for that fake house." He exhaled slowly. "You're not going to the police?" "I will if you force me to." He stared at me, weighing his options. Maybe he realized that I did not look like the desperate woman he had met before. Maybe he saw that something stronger had awakened inside me. Finally, he nodded. "Fine. Give me a week." "No," I said. "You have 48 hours. A brief flash of irritation crossed his face, but he said nothing more. He stood up and walked away without looking back. I stayed seated for a while. My hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the weight of everything finally settling. I felt like I had just walked out of a burning house, alive, smoke-covered, but alive. That night, I received a transfer notification. The money was back. The next morning, Damir's number was disconnected. His social media gone. His email vanished. It was like he had never existed at all. But I existed. My mistakes existed. And now, something inside me had changed forever. The world still held shadows, but I was no longer walking blindly into them. I learned to carry my own light. The days after Damir disappeared felt strangely quiet. It was like someone had turned down the volume of my entire life. No messages, no drama, no lies, just silence. For the first time in months, I woke up without checking my phone immediately. I made tea, stood by the window, and let the morning light wash over me. It felt unfamiliar, like peace trying to return slowly after being pushed away for too long. But the truth was, even though the danger was gone, the damage inside me was still there. I kept asking myself the same question. How did I allow someone to enter my life so deeply, so quickly, without seeing who he really was? The question followed me through my day like a shadow. I met my friend Sana for lunch. She had been honest with me from the start, warning me to move slowly. When she saw me, her eyes softened. "You look different," she said. "I feel different," I replied. We talked for a long time. I told her everything, how Damir reacted, how the meeting went, how he agreed to return the money. Sana listened quietly, her face serious. When I finished, she breathed out slowly. "You handled it better than most people would," she said. "It doesn't feel like that," I admitted. "It feels like I almost lost everything." "You lost something," she said gently, "but you also gained something. You saw your own strength." Her words stayed with me. Strength. I had never thought of myself that way. I always believed I was someone who trusted too easily, someone who gave too much, someone who always hoped people were better than they really were. But now, I had proof that I could protect myself when it truly mattered. Later that week, I received another message, this time from an unknown number. For a moment, fear rose in my throat. But when I opened it, the message was simple. I'm sorry for everything. No explanation, no excuses, no attempt to come back, just a sentence that arrived too late to change anything. I deleted it. After that, I decided I needed to rebuild my life intentionally, piece by piece. I started by making small changes. I changed my routine. I went for long walks. I cleaned my apartment, clearing out things that reminded me of those months with Demir. The empty spaces felt refreshing, like my home was breathing again. I also started journaling. At first, the pages were filled with confusion and anger. But as the days passed, the words became calmer. I wrote about what I wanted in my future, what kind of relationships I hoped to build, and what kind of woman I wanted to become. Writing helped me understand something important. I didn't fall for Demir because I was weak. I fell because I was human. One evening, while sitting on my balcony, I got a call from my lawyer friend, the one who had helped me gather evidence. I reviewed everything, he said. If he tries anything again, you're covered. You also did the smart thing by confronting him with documents. People like him don't stay when they know someone can expose them. Do you think he'll ever come back? I asked. No, he said firmly. He will move on to someone else. That's what people like him do. But you have nothing to fear. You stopped him before he crossed the line. His words gave me a kind of closure I didn't realize I needed. Days passed, then weeks. Life began to feel normal again. But it was not the same kind of normal I had before Demir. This new version of myself was more careful, more aware, more grounded. I was no longer quick to trust every sweet word or perfect promise. One night, I sat down and went through the old messages he had sent me, the affectionate words, the shared dreams, the plans he pretended to have for our future. I read them slowly, one by one, and instead of sadness, I felt a strange detachment. It was like reading a story written for someone else. I deleted everything, not out of anger, out of freedom. After that, something shifted inside me. I began applying for new projects at work, pushing myself to grow in ways I had paused during those months of emotional confusion. I reconnected with old friends. I took a weekend trip alone. I allowed myself to breathe again without the weight of fear or doubt. I realized that healing doesn't happen in big dramatic moments. It happens quietly, in the small decisions we make every day, the decision to wake up, to try again, to believe in ourselves even when we feel broken. And slowly, the pieces of my life began fitting back together, not in the same shape as before, but in a stronger, clearer form. Life began moving forward, but healing has a strange rhythm. Some days I woke up feeling confident, ready to face anything. Other days, the memory of Demir's lies returned like a dull ache. It wasn't constant pain, just a reminder that wounds don't vanish as soon as the danger is gone. One evening, while organizing files on my laptop, I found a folder named Future Plans. It was full of screenshots. The house Demir said we would buy, the messages where he talked about marriage, the voice notes where he sounded so sure about our future together. Looking at those files felt like opening a drawer full of broken promises. I hovered my finger over the delete key but didn't press it. Not yet. I wasn't holding on to hope. I was holding on to the lesson. A few days later, I joined a small evening class recommended by Sana. It focused on emotional awareness and boundaries, things I never thought I needed to learn formally. The first day felt awkward. Everyone sat in a circle, sharing stories of trust betrayed, relationships gone wrong, mistakes that still stung. When my turn came, I spoke quietly about what happened with Demir. I didn't give all the details, but enough for them to understand. The instructor nodded and said, "You faced manipulation. You survived it. Now you're learning to rebuild yourself without carrying the blame." Something softened inside me when I heard that. For months, I'd been blaming myself for believing him, for ignoring the red flags, for trusting someone who didn't deserve it. Hearing someone say it wasn't my fault felt like someone finally lifting a heavy curtain that had been hanging inside my chest. As the weeks passed, the class became a kind of anchor. I learned how easily people like Demir identify kindness as weakness. I learned how to say no without guilt. I learned how to listen to my instincts instead of silencing them. Slowly, I felt myself becoming someone steadier, someone harder to fool. But healing doesn't always happen in straight lines. One night, around midnight, my phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number again. My heart jumped before I even opened it. "Are you awake?" 2 words. No name attached, but every part of me recognized the pattern. That was how Demir used to start conversations whenever he wanted attention. My chest tightened, but I didn't reply. I waited. A minute passed, then another message came. "I want to talk." It had to be him. For a moment, I froze. The old fear tried to rise again, but this time, something stronger stepped forward inside me. I blocked the number instantly. Then I set my phone down and breathed out slowly. My hands were shaking a little, but not from fear, from relief. The next morning, I told Sana. She shrugged lightly. "He's checking if you're still vulnerable," she said. "You didn't respond. That's enough to end it." And she was right. After that night, there were no more messages. I decided it was time to close the chapter completely. I opened the future plans folder again. This time, there was no hesitation. I selected everything and deleted it permanently. Watching the files disappear felt like finally releasing a weight I had been carrying without realizing how heavy it had become. With that space cleared, I started working on something new, a list called Future Without Fear. It wasn't a grand vision board or a long set of goals. It was simple but honest. Things like take care of my mental peace, protect my boundaries, listen to my instincts, trust slowly, love myself enough not to settle. Writing that list felt like planting new seeds in soil that had finally healed. Around this time, I also started receiving more responsibilities at work. My manager noticed the change in my focus and gave me a major project to lead. It felt good, steady, rewarding, real. A kind of progress that didn't depend on anyone else's approval. A few days later, while waiting for my ride, I caught my reflection in a glass window. I noticed something subtle. My shoulders were not tense anymore. My eyes looked clearer. I wasn't carrying the same invisible weight. For the first time in months, I felt proud of myself. Not because I survived something painful. People survive heartbreak every day. But because I chose to grow from it, instead of letting it turn me bitter or afraid. I realized then that the real danger was never Demir. The real danger was losing myself in the chaos he brought into my life. And I had refused to let that happen. The world outside still had people like him. It always will. But now, I knew how to see them clearly. I knew how to protect my heart without building walls around it. I knew how to trust carefully without losing hope. Most of all, I knew that I would never again ignore my inner voice, the one that whispers warnings before the mind catches up. That voice had saved me. And now, I was finally learning to listen. Weeks passed quietly, and with every passing day, my life felt more balanced. But healing has its own way of testing us. Just when we think everything is stable, something small arrives to see if we've really changed. One afternoon, while I was leaving work, I received an email from a woman named Aliyah. I didn't recognize the name, but the subject line made my heart drop. "I need to talk to you about Demir." For a moment, the world around me blurred. I stood frozen near the office entrance, my phone cold in my hand. I opened the email slowly, bracing myself. Aaliyah wrote that she had met Demir 2 months earlier. He had promised her everything he once promised me: stability, support, a future. He told her he had a successful business, that he was saving for a house, that he wanted to settle down. She believed him. Then she found my number saved in his phone. At first, she thought it was nothing. But a week later, she found conversations he had deleted, long threads about house payments, wedding plans, and shared dreams. She said she felt her stomach twist because the words sounded too perfect, too polished, too similar to what he had told her. She tried confronting him, but he avoided her questions. In fear and confusion, she searched my name online and eventually found my professional profile. That's how she reached me. Her last line was simple: "I think he is doing to me what he did to you. Please help me." I stood there for a long time, reading her message again and again. My first reaction was sadness. Sadness for her, sadness for myself, sadness that someone else had walked into the same illusion I escaped. But under that sadness was something stronger: clarity. I wrote back calmly, telling her everything I had learned. I explained the lies, the fake investments, the disappearing act. I attached copies of the documents I had collected. I told her how I confronted him, how he reacted, and how quickly he vanished when he felt exposed. I ended my message with a sentence I wish someone had told me months earlier: "None of this is your fault." She replied almost immediately. Her words were shaky but grateful. She said she felt a mix of pain and relief. Pain because the truth hurt. Relief because she finally understood what had been happening. We talked for a while, not as victims, and not as people fighting for attention from the same man. We spoke as two women trying to rebuild themselves after being pulled into someone's lie. Later that night, Sana and I sat at my kitchen table drinking tea. When I told her about Aaliyah, she sighed deeply. "There will be more," she said softly. "People like him don't stop until someone forces them to." Her words stayed in my mind long after she left. I lay awake thinking about the pattern, how Demir moved from one person to another, collecting trust like trophies, leaving behind confusion and heartbreak. I wondered how many women carried the same quiet pain I once carried. I wondered if anyone before me had tried to warn the next. And for the first time, a strange thought settled inside me. Maybe I wasn't supposed to stay silent, not to attack him, not to get revenge, but to protect others from becoming the next target. I didn't want to become obsessed with exposing him. I didn't want my life to revolve around the shadow of a man who no longer had any power over me. But I also didn't want to pretend that nothing had happened. So I took a small step. I wrote a private document, an account of everything that had happened, with dates, screenshots, voice notes, and copies of the false papers he used. I kept the language clear and calm, not emotional. I stored the file in a secure drive. It wasn't for me. It was for the next woman who might need it. A week later, Aaliyah emailed me again. She had confronted him with the evidence. He denied everything at first. Then, just like with me, his calm mask cracked. And then, he vanished from her life too. Different woman, same ending. But this time, someone warned her early. She escaped before giving him her time, her money, or her heart. That night, I felt something shift inside me, a lightness I hadn't expected. Not because Demir disappeared again, but because I had broken the cycle for someone else. Helping Aaliyah didn't reopen my wounds. It closed them. It reminded me that healing isn't only about rebuilding yourself. It's also about reaching out quietly, gently, and preventing someone else from falling where you once fell. For the first time, I felt like a chapter of my story had truly ended, not with pain, not with fear, but with strength. And maybe that was the real turning point. The more distance I gained from Demir, the clearer everything became. It was like stepping out of a fog that I didn't realize had been surrounding me for months. Life slowly returned to its natural rhythm, but with a new awareness guiding me. I didn't move through the world the same way anymore. I was more grounded, more observant, and strangely, calmer. One Saturday morning, while I was watering the plants on my balcony, I received another message, this time from an unknown woman named Rania. My chest tightened for a second, expecting the worst, but her tone was different, softer, hesitant. She wrote, "I heard from Aaliyah. She said you helped her. Can I talk to you?" I closed my eyes and breathed out slowly. Part of me wondered how many more lives Demir had crossed. Another part of me felt a deep sadness that women had to find each other this way, through shared wounds. But I replied gently, telling her she could share whatever she needed to. Rania explained that she had known Demir briefly. He had approached her confidently, speaking with that same warmth and charm I once believed in. But before things went far, she sensed something was off. She couldn't explain it exactly, just a quiet discomfort in her chest. When she asked him basic questions about his work, he got defensive. When she asked about his family, he changed the subject. He had promised to show her some investment plans, but never actually sent anything. Everything felt staged. Then she met Alaya at a mutual friends gathering, and when Demir's name came up by accident, both of them fell silent. That silence led to a long conversation, and eventually to my contact information. I told Rania everything she needed to know. She thanked me repeatedly, her relief pouring through her words. I reminded her gently that trusting someone isn't a weakness. It's something beautiful, something dangerous people misuse. But that doesn't make trust wrong. It just means we must learn when to protect it. After our conversation, I sat quietly for a long time. My plants, the empty mug beside me, the sunlight creeping across my balcony. Everything felt different. Through helping others, I'd unknowingly helped myself. That afternoon, Sana came over with snacks. I told her about Ranaya, and she gave me a long, thoughtful look. "You know," she said, "you've become the person you once needed." Her words struck me deeply. Maybe that's what healing really is, becoming the version of yourself you wished could have guided you through your darkest moments. A few days later, something unexpected happened. I received a call from a journalist who ran a small online platform focused on relationship awareness and emotional safety. She told me that someone had anonymously shared my contact as a person who could speak about manipulation and trust scams. She wanted to interview me, not using my real name, not showing my face, just my experience and advice. My first instinct was to refuse. I wasn't sure if I wanted to revisit everything publicly, even without revealing my identity. But then I remembered Aaliyah and Ranaya, and the quiet message that never left my mind, "I think he is doing to me what he did to you." I agreed. The interview was done through voice call. The journalist asked respectful, careful questions about how manipulation starts, how red flags hide behind charming words, how people lose themselves slowly without noticing. I answered honestly, in simple language, focusing not on Demir, but on the pattern. I wanted the listeners to understand the signs before they fell into the same trap. When the interview was published, it reached more people than I expected. Comments flowed in. Women, men, friends, siblings, all sharing their own experiences. Many said they finally understood something that had confused them for years. Some said they wished they had heard such a story earlier. Reading their messages felt like watching small lights ignite across a dark field. Quiet, steady, hopeful. One message stood out. It said, "Thank you for speaking. Your story gave me the courage to leave someone who was controlling my whole life." I read that sentence 3 times. A warm heaviness filled my chest. My pain had not been meaningless. It had become something useful, something that could protect others. That night, I lay in bed thinking about the journey. I'd entered it blind, hopeful, trusting. I'd walked through fire, believing I might collapse. But instead of burning, I had changed shape. My edges were sharper now, but not cold. My heart was cautious, but not closed. I realized something important. Healing doesn't promise that pain will disappear. It promises that pain will eventually stop controlling your life. The next morning, I opened my curtains, letting the sunlight fill the room. I looked at my reflection and saw someone I recognized, someone stronger, clearer, and quietly brave, someone who had survived, someone who had transformed, and someone who was finally ready to live fully again, without fear holding the strings. Months had passed since the last time Demir's shadow touched any corner of my life. By now, the story felt distant, like an old bruise that no longer hurt when pressed, just a mark that proved I had once survived something sharp. Life had grown calmer, fuller. I had learned to enjoy the small things again, the warm taste of morning tea, the steady rhythm of work, the comfort of friendships, the quiet glow of evenings in my living room. There was nothing dramatic, nothing extraordinary, but for the first time in a long time, my days felt truly mine. One afternoon, while walking home from work, I passed a small bookstore. Something pulled me inside. Maybe it was the soft yellow light or the smell of old paper, comforting like a familiar memory. I wandered between the shelves until a thin book caught my attention. Its title was simple, Rebuilding Yourself After Betrayal. I smiled faintly. The timing felt almost poetic. I bought it without thinking and read the first chapter that night. The author wrote that healing isn't about forgetting the people who hurt us. It's about reclaiming the parts of ourselves they tried to take. I closed the book and realized something. Demir had taken my trust for a while, yes, but he hadn't destroyed it. I had rebuilt it, slowly, carefully, with better foundations. A few weeks later, I decided to travel. Not far, not expensive, just a short trip to a quiet town by the sea. I packed lightly, took a morning bus, and arrived before noon. The air smelled of salt and fresh bread from the nearby cafe. I spent hours walking along the shoreline, letting the waves erase old thoughts with every step. On the second day, I sat on a bench overlooking the water. An elderly woman sat beside me, humming softly. After a while, she said, "You look peaceful." I laughed softly. "It took a long time to get here." She nodded knowingly. "It always does." We didn't talk about details. We didn't need to. Some people understand pain without hearing the story behind it. When she left, she touched my shoulder gently, a gesture that felt like a blessing. That evening, I wrote in my journal, the same journal that had once been filled with fear and confusion. Now, the pages carried gratitude, clarity, and something new, hope. I wrote, "I did not choose what happened to me, but I chose what I became after it, and that choice has changed everything." When I returned home, I felt lighter. My apartment felt warmer. Even my own reflection looked softer, as if I had finally exhaled a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding for months. A week later, something unexpected happened. I received a message from a woman who had listened to my anonymous interview. She thanked me for speaking openly and said that her sister had walked away from a controlling partner after hearing it. I stared at that message for a long time. One story, one voice, one small act of courage, passing from person to person like a quiet ripple in water. Healing, spreading quietly, almost silently. I realized then that my story was no longer about Demir. It hadn't been for a long time. It was about every woman who had ever doubted her instincts, every woman who had mistaken manipulation for love, every person who had felt trapped in something that didn't feel right, but couldn't explain why. It was about breaking free. It was about rising again. One evening, Sana and I sat together on my balcony, watching the city lights blink like distant fireflies. She looked at me thoughtfully and said, "You know, you've changed." "I know," I said. "Are you happy?" I paused, not because I was unsure, but because it felt good to consider the question slowly. Then I answered, "Yes, I think I finally am." Not the kind of happy that comes from excitement or romance or temporary joy. A deeper kind, a steady kind, the kind that grows quietly after you've rebuilt yourself piece by piece. Before going to bed that night, I looked at my phone, now free of unknown numbers, fake promises, and late-night messages that once kept me awake. I placed it on my nightstand and turned off the lights with a calm heart. I was no longer afraid of the past. I was no longer waiting for closure. I was no longer carrying someone else's chaos inside me. Instead, I had turned the ending of one painful chapter into the beginning of something stronger, something wiser, something beautifully my own. And as I lay down to sleep, I realized the truth clearly, quietly, completely. I didn't just survive, I transformed.